Dr. Malik Anderson stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his white coat. The crisp fabric felt like armor against the challenges he knew he'd face today. His eyes drifted to a framed photo of his grandmother, her stern yet kind face a constant reminder of the battles she fought during the civil rights movement. "Another day, another chance to make a difference," Malik muttered, echoing his grandmother's words. He grabbed his stethoscope and headed out, the weight of her legacy heavy on his shoulders. The clinic buzzed with activity as Malik strode through the doors. Nurses and fellow doctors greeted him warmly, a stark contrast to the tension he often felt from some patients. He nodded, forcing a smile as he mentally prepared for his first appointment. "Dr. Anderson, your 9 a.m. is here," the receptionist called out, her voice tinged with concern. Malik knew that tone. It meant trouble. He took a deep breath and entered the examination room. Mr. Thompson, an elderly white man with a history of heart problems, sat on the edge of the bed, his face contorted in a scowl. "Well, look who they sent in," Thompson spat, his eyes narrowing. "I asked for a real doctor, not some affirmative action hire." Malik felt his jaw clench, but he maintained his composure. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm Dr. Anderson, and I'll be examining you today." Thompson snorted. "I don't want your hands on me, boy. Get me someone who knows what they're doing." The slur hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Malik forced a smile, remembering his grandmother's words, "Kill them with kindness, but never let them see you bleed." "Mr. Thompson, I assure you I'm fully qualified to treat you. Now, if you'll allow me to begin the examination, we can address your concerns." Thompson reluctantly complied, muttering under his breath. As Malik began the checkup, he could feel the old man's eyes boring into him, filled with distrust and prejudice. Every movement was a challenge. Malik's training kicked in as he methodically went through the examination, but each racist comment Thompson made was like a small dagger to his professional pride. "Your heart rate seems elevated, Mr. Thompson. Have you been under any stress lately?" Malik asked, trying to redirect the conversation. "Yeah, the stress of having to deal with people like you taking over everything," Thompson retorted. Malik took a deep breath, centering himself. He knew that behind every hateful word was often a person in pain, but it didn't make the situation any easier. He continued the examination, determined to provide the best care possible, regardless of Thompson's attitude. As the appointment drew to a close, Malik handed Thompson his prescription, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. In that instant, Malik saw a flicker of something beyond the hate. Fear, perhaps, or loneliness. It was a reminder that even the most difficult patients were still human, with their own struggles and stories. As Malik continued the examination, he noticed Thompson's breathing was labored and his skin had a slight bluish tinge. These symptoms pointed to more severe cardiovascular issues than initially suspected. Malik's medical training kicked in, overriding his personal feelings about Thompson's behavior. "Mr. Thompson, I'm noticing some concerning symptoms. We need to run some additional tests," Malik said, his tone professional and firm. Thompson's face contorted with anger. "What are you talking about? I don't need any more of your quack medicine. You people always try to milk us for more money." Malik took a deep breath, reminding himself of his grandmother's wisdom about empathy. He tried again. "Sir, these symptoms could indicate a serious heart condition. It's crucial we investigate further for your own safety." "Safety? Huh?" Thompson scoffed. "The only thing I need safety from is incompetent doctors like you. I bet you barely passed medical school." The insult stung, but Malik pushed through. He began explaining the potential risks of ignoring these symptoms, but Thompson cut him off mid-sentence. "Save your breath. I don't need a lecture from someone like you. Just give me my usual prescription and let me out of here." Malik felt his patience wearing thin. He closed his eyes briefly, picturing his grandmother's face. Her voice echoed in his mind. Empathy is the key to healing, not just bodies, but minds and hearts too. Opening his eyes, Malik tried a different approach. "Mr. Thompson, I understand you're frustrated, but I took an oath to provide the best care possible to all my patients, regardless of who they are or how they feel about me. Right now, my primary concern is your health." Thompson's expression flickered, a mix of surprise and uncertainty replacing his usual scowl. For a moment, it seemed like Malik's words had broken through. But then the old man's face hardened again. Fine, run your tests. But I want a second opinion from a real doctor afterward. Malik nodded, choosing to focus on the small victory of Thompson, agreeing to the tests rather than the continuing insults. He explained the procedures they needed to perform, keeping his tone neutral and informative. As Malik prepared the equipment, he noticed Thompson's hands trembling slightly. Despite the man's bravado, fear was evident in his eyes. It was a stark reminder that beneath the layers of prejudice and anger was a vulnerable human being facing his own mortality. The test confirmed Malik's suspicions. Thompson needed immediate treatment for a severe heart condition. As Malik delivered the news, he saw Thompson's defiant exterior crumble slightly, replaced by a look of genuine fear. "So what now, Doc?" Thompson asked, his voice lacking its usual bite. Malik explained the treatment options calmly and clearly, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. Despite the gravity of the news, Thompson's resistance remained. He hesitated, his distrust battling with his need for medical care. I need to think about it," Thompson muttered, avoiding Malik's gaze. Malik nodded, understanding that trust would take time to build. He provided Thompson with information about the recommended treatments and scheduled a follow-up appointment, hoping that this health scare might be the first step towards breaking down the walls between them. Over the next few weeks, Malik managed to convince Thompson to undergo the necessary treatments. Despite his initial resistance, Thompson's fear of his deteriorating health eventually outweighed his prejudices. As they met for regular checkups, Malik noticed subtle changes in Thompson's demeanor. During one of these follow-up appointments, Thompson's usual hostility seemed subdued. His shoulders slumped, and dark circles underlined his eyes. Malik sensed an opportunity to dig deeper. "How have you been coping with the treatments, Mr. Thompson?" Malik asked, his tone professional but gentle. Thompson shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Fine, I guess. It's not like I have much choice." Malik nodded, jotting down notes. "I've noticed you seem more withdrawn lately. Is there anything else going on that might be affecting your health?" For a moment, Thompson's face hardened, and Malik braced himself for another outburst. But then, unexpectedly, Thompson's expression crumpled. "My wife," he mumbled. "She passed away 3 months ago." The revelation hit Malik like a wave. Suddenly, Thompson's increased hostility over the past few months made more sense. Grief could manifest in many ways, including increased aggression and irritability. "I'm sorry for your loss," Malik said sincerely. "That must be incredibly difficult." Thompson nodded, his eyes glistening. "She was the only one who understood me. Now, I'm just alone." Malik realized that Thompson's racist remarks and hostile behavior might be a misguided attempt to cope with his pain and loneliness. It didn't excuse his actions, but it provided context. "Mr. Thompson, grief can have a significant impact on our physical and emotional health. Have you considered speaking with a grief counselor?" Thompson scoffed, some of his old defensiveness returning. "I don't need some shrink poking around in my head." Malik decided to try a different approach. "Can you tell me a bit about your family history? Sometimes, understanding our past can help us navigate our present." Thompson hesitated, eyeing Malik suspiciously, but something in the doctor's steady gaze seemed to reassure him. "Well, I suppose it couldn't hurt," Thompson muttered. As Thompson began to speak, Malik listened attentively. The old man spoke of his childhood in rural Georgia, his father's strict upbringing, and the deeply ingrained racial attitudes of his community. He talked about meeting his wife, how she had challenged some of his beliefs, and how lost he felt without her. Malik found himself drawn into Thompson's story. Despite the man's flaws, there was a vulnerability in his words that was impossible to ignore. As Thompson spoke, Malik saw glimpses of the pain and fear that lay beneath the surface of his prejudices. By the end of the appointment, a shift had occurred. The air between them felt less tense, more open. Thompson even managed a gruff "thank you" as he left, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. As Malik watched Thompson leave, he felt a mix of emotions. There was still a long way to go, but this conversation had opened a door. It was a reminder that behind every patient, even the most difficult ones, there was a human story waiting to be understood. In their next appointment, Thompson arrived with a slightly more relaxed demeanor. Malik seized this opportunity to delve deeper into Thompson's family history, hoping to build on the progress they had made. Mr. Thompson, last time you mentioned your upbringing in Georgia. Could you tell me more about your family's background? Malik asked as he checked Thompson's blood pressure. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Not much to tell, really. We've always been here, going back generations. My folks, well, they had certain ideas about how things should be. Malik nodded, encouraging Thompson to continue. What kind of ideas? Thompson's eyes darted around the room, avoiding Malik's gaze. You know, the usual stuff for that time and place. Keeping to our own kind, not mixing with others. Malik kept his expression neutral, despite the implications of Thompson's words. And how do you feel about those ideas now? There was a long pause. Thompson's hands fidgeted in his lap. I don't know, he finally admitted. It's all I've ever known. But lately, I've been wondering if maybe we got some things wrong. This admission, however small, felt like a breakthrough. Malik decided to share some of his own background, hoping to foster a connection. My grandmother was a civil rights activist, Malik said. She always taught me that understanding and empathy were the keys to breaking down barriers between people. Thompson looked up, a mix of surprise and curiosity on his face. Really? What kind of things did she do? Malik began to recount stories of his grandmother's involvement in sit-ins and marches, her dedication to education and community building. As he spoke, he noticed Thompson listening intently, his usual scowl replaced by a look of thoughtful consideration. She sounds like a brave woman, Thompson said quietly when Malik finished. She was, Malik agreed. She believed that change was possible, even in the face of deep-rooted prejudices. Thompson nodded slowly, seeming lost in thought. You know, my wife. She used to say similar things, always pushing me to reconsider my views. I didn't listen much then, but now? His voice trailed off, but Malik understood. Change was a slow, often painful process, but Thompson was showing signs of being open to it. As the appointment concluded, Thompson paused at the door. Doc, I've been thinking. Some of the things I've said to you, well, they weren't right. I can't promise I'll change overnight, but I'm trying to see things differently. Malik felt a surge of emotion at this unexpected apology. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That means a lot. As Thompson left, Malik reflected on their conversation. It was a small step, but a significant one. He remembered his grandmother's words, change happens one heart at a time. Today, it felt like they had made progress in that direction. A few days after his conversation with Thompson, Malik found himself rummaging through his grandmother's old belongings. He'd been inspired to revisit her legacy after sharing her stories with Thompson. As he sorted through a dusty trunk filled with memorabilia, a yellowed envelope caught his eye. Curious, Malik opened it to find a letter dated 1963. As he read, his eyes widened in disbelief. The letter revealed a surprising connection between the Anderson and Thompson families, dating back to the civil rights era. Malik's hands trembled as he realized the implications of this discovery. He knew he had to share this information with Thompson, but he was unsure how the older man would react. At Thompson's next appointment, Malik took a deep breath and broached the subject. Mr. Thompson, I found something I think you should see, he said, pulling out the letter. Thompson looked puzzled as Malik handed him the document. As he read, his face cycled through a range of emotions: confusion, shock, and finally, a mix of shame and wonder. This can't be right, Thompson muttered, his voice shaky. Are you saying we're related? Malik nodded. It appears we're distant cousins. Our families' histories are more intertwined than either of us knew. Thompson sat in stunned silence, the letter clutched in his trembling hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. All these years, all the things I've said and believed. Malik watched as Thompson struggled with this new reality. The revelation seemed to shake the very foundation of the older man's worldview. I don't know what to say, Thompson continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. The way I've treated you, the things I've said, I'm ashamed. Malik felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to bask in Thompson's remorse, to let the man stew in the consequences of his lifelong prejudice. But another part, the part that embodied his grandmother's teachings, urged compassion. Mr. Thompson, Malik said gently, we can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward from here. Thompson nodded slowly, still visibly shaken. You're right. I've got a lot of thinking to do. A lot of reconsidering. As their appointment concluded, Thompson paused at the door. Dr. Anderson, Malik, I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I truly am sorry. And thank you for not giving up on me. Malik nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. That's what family does, he said, surprising himself with the words. As Thompson left, Malik reflected on the unexpected turn of events. The road ahead would not be easy, but this revelation had opened a door to understanding that neither of them could have anticipated. It was a reminder that healing, both physical and emotional, often came from the most unexpected places. The revelation about their family connection sparked a series of more frequent, less formal meetings between Malik and Thompson. As they delved into their shared history, Malik's daughter, Aisha, became increasingly curious about her father's newfound relationship with the once hostile patient. One evening, as Malik recounted his latest conversation with Thompson over dinner, Aisha's eyes lit up with an idea. Dad, this is amazing, she exclaimed. Do you realize what an opportunity this is? We could use your story to educate people about overcoming prejudice. Malik raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, sweetheart? Aisha leaned forward, her enthusiasm palpable. I want to organize an event at school. We could talk about acceptance, diversity, and how people can change. You and Mr. Thompson could share your experiences. Malik felt a mix of pride and apprehension. That's a wonderful idea, Aisha, but I'm not sure if Thompson or I are ready for something so public. But Dad, Aisha persisted, think about the impact you could have. Isn't this what Grandma would have wanted? The mention of his grandmother gave Malik pause. He couldn't deny that Aisha had a point. Over the next few weeks, Aisha threw herself into organizing the event. She coordinated with her school's administration, reached out to community leaders, and even started a social media campaign to promote awareness. As the day of the event approached, Malik found himself growing increasingly nervous. He had agreed to participate, but the thought of sharing such a personal journey in front of an audience was daunting. The night before the event, Malik sat in his study, staring at the notes he'd prepared for his speech. Doubt crept in, and he considered backing out. Sensing his hesitation, Aisha knocked on the door. Dad, can I come in? Malik nodded, and Aisha entered, sitting beside him. Are you okay? She asked. Malik sighed. I'm not sure I can do this, Aisha. It's one thing to talk about these issues in private, but to stand up in front of all those people. Aisha placed her hand on his arm. Dad, do you remember what you told me about Grandma? How she never backed down from a challenge when it came to fighting for what's right? Malik nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Well, Aisha continued, this is your chance to continue her legacy, to show people that change is possible, that we can overcome our differences and find common ground. As Malik looked into his daughter's earnest face, he felt a surge of pride and determination. She was right. This was exactly what his grandmother would have done. You're right, sweetheart, he said, pulling her into a hug. Thank you for reminding me what's important. As Aisha left the room, Malik turned back to his notes with renewed purpose. Tomorrow would be challenging, but with his family's support and the memory of his grandmother's courage, he knew he could face it. The day of the community event arrived, bringing with it a nervous energy that permeated the school auditorium. As people filed in, Malik stood backstage, his heart racing. He spotted Thompson in the wings, looking equally apprehensive. Quite a turnout, Thompson muttered, his eyes scanning the growing crowd. Malik nodded, noticing familiar faces from both their families mixed with curious community members. The diversity of the audience was striking, a visual representation of the change they were trying to promote. As Aisha took the stage to introduce the event, Malik felt a surge of pride. His daughter spoke with passion and clarity, outlining the importance of acceptance and understanding in their community. Then, it was Thompson's turn to speak. Malik watched as the older man approached the podium, his steps hesitant but determined. Thompson cleared his throat, his hands gripping the sides of the podium. I I'm not good at public speaking, Thompson began, his voice shaky. But I'm here because I need to say this. For most of my life, I've been wrong. Wrong about a lot of things, but especially wrong about people who are different from me. As Thompson continued, his voice grew stronger. He spoke of his upbringing, his ingrained prejudices, and the recent events that had forced him to confront his beliefs. The audience listened in rapt attention, many nodding in understanding or wiping away tears. It's not easy to admit you've been wrong for so long, Thompson said, his voice cracking with emotion. But thanks to Dr. Anderson, to Malik, I'm learning that it's never too late to change. As Thompson concluded his speech, the auditorium erupted in applause. Malik felt overwhelmed by the response, realizing the impact their story was having. When it was Malik's turn to speak, he approached the podium with a newfound confidence. He shared his own journey, the challenges he'd faced as a black doctor, the lessons his grandmother had taught him, and the unexpected friendship that had developed with Thompson. Change isn't easy, Malik said, looking out at the sea of faces. It requires us to be vulnerable, to admit our mistakes, and to be willing to see the humanity in those we once considered different or even enemies. But as Mr. Thompson and I have learned, it's a journey worth taking. As Malik spoke, he noticed Aisha in the front row, beaming with pride. He saw members of both his and Thompson's families, sitting side by side, listening intently. In that moment, he felt the weight of history, both the painful past and the hopeful future, resting on his shoulders. As he concluded his speech, Malik invited Thompson back to the stage. The two men stood side by side, a living testament to the power of understanding and reconciliation. The audience rose in a standing ovation, the sound of their applause washing over Malik like a wave of hope. In that moment, Malik felt that they had taken a significant step toward healing, not just for themselves, but for their community as a whole. As the applause died down, a young man from the audience approached the stage. He introduced himself as Marcus, a local activist who had been deeply moved by Malik and Thompson's story. Dr. Anderson, Mr. Thompson, Marcus began, his voice filled with passion. Your journey is inspiring. I'd like to help spread this message of change and understanding throughout our community. Would you be willing to work with me on future events? Malik and Thompson exchanged glances, both surprised and intrigued by the offer. Before they could respond, Aisha stepped forward, her eyes shining with excitement. That's a great idea, she exclaimed. In fact, why don't we form a youth group to discuss these issues regularly? We could meet weekly, tackle different topics, and work on community projects. The suggestion was met with enthusiasm from the audience. Several students immediately volunteered to join, and even some adults expressed interest in supporting the initiative. Malik watched in amazement as his daughter took charge, coordinating with Marcus and other volunteers to set up the first meeting. He felt a surge of pride mixed with a tinge of apprehension. This was taking on a life of its own, far beyond what he had initially envisioned. Thompson leaned over, his voice low. Your girl's got spunk, Malik. Reminds me of how you described your grandmother. Malik nodded, a lump forming in his throat. She certainly does. I think Grandma would be proud. As the crowd began to disperse, Malik and Thompson found themselves surrounded by well-wishers and curious community members. They fielded questions, shared more of their story, and listened to others who had been inspired to share their own experiences with prejudice and reconciliation. Amidst the buzz of conversation, Malik caught sight of Aisha deep in discussion with Marcus and a group of her peers. They were huddled around a table, scribbling notes and gesturing animatedly as they planned their first group meeting. Looks like the next generation is ready to take the reins, Thompson observed, following Malik's gaze. Malik nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. Pride in his daughter's initiative, hope for the future, and a sense of accomplishment in knowing that their personal journey had sparked something larger. As the event wound down, Malik and Thompson stood at the back of the auditorium, watching as the last attendees filed out. The energy in the room had been palpable, a sense of possibility hanging in the air. We've started something here, haven't we? Thompson mused, his tone a mix of wonder and trepidation. Malik smiled, placing a hand on Thompson's shoulder. I think we have, and who knows where it might lead. As they left the auditorium, Both men felt the weight of the day's events settling on them. They had taken a significant step, not just in their personal relationship, but in fostering change within their community. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was filled with hope. In the weeks following the community event, Malik and Thompson's relationship continued to evolve. What had started as a contentious doctor-patient dynamic had blossomed into an unlikely friendship. They began sharing meals together, alternating between their homes for family dinners. During one such dinner at Malik's house, Thompson sat at the table, looking slightly out of place but more relaxed than ever before. Aisha chatted animatedly about the success of the youth group, while Malik's wife, Leah, served a homemade peach cobbler. "You know," Thompson said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I never thought I'd be sitting here like this. With people I used to." "We know, Mr. Thompson," Leah said gently, patting his hand. "What matters is where we are now." As they shared stories and laughter, Malik couldn't help but marvel at the change. The tension that had once defined his interactions with Thompson had all but disappeared. In its place was a genuine warmth and understanding. This newfound connection didn't go unnoticed in the community. Malik found that patients who had once been hesitant to see a black doctor were now more open and trusting. Thompson, for his part, had become an unexpected advocate for equality, challenging old prejudices among his peers. One evening, as Malik was finishing up at the clinic, he received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end introduced himself as James Thompson, a distant cousin of Mr. Thompson. "Dr. Anderson," James said, his voice hesitant, "I've heard about what's been happening between you and my cousin. I was wondering if we could meet. There's something I'd like to discuss with both of you." Malik felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Of course," he replied. "I'll speak with Mr. Thompson, and we can set something up." After hanging up, Malik sat back in his chair, his mind racing. What could this new Thompson want? Was this another step forward in their journey of reconciliation, or would it bring new challenges? He called Thompson immediately to relay the message. Thompson's reaction mirrored his own, a mixture of interest and nervousness. "I haven't spoken to James in years," Thompson admitted. "We had a falling out over my views back then. Do you think we should meet him?" Malik took a deep breath, considering. "I think we have to," he said finally. "Whatever comes of it, it's part of this path we're on. We can face it together." As they agreed on a time and place to meet James, Malik felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in his stomach. Just when things had started to settle into a new normal, life was throwing them another curveball. But as he thought about how far they'd come, from bitter adversaries to friends sharing family dinners, Malik felt a surge of confidence. Whatever this new development brought, they would handle it the same way they'd handled everything else, with openness, honesty, and a willingness to learn and grow. The day of the meeting with James Thompson arrived. Malik and Thompson sat side by side in a local coffee shop, both tense with anticipation. When James walked in, the family resemblance was immediately apparent. He had the same piercing blue eyes as Thompson, though his face was younger and less weathered. After awkward introductions, James got straight to the point. "I've been following your story," he said, looking between Malik and Thompson. "What you've done, the changes you've made, it's incredible. And it's made me think about our family's history." James reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've been doing some research, and I've uncovered something I think you both need to see." As James spread out documents on the table, Malik and Thompson leaned in, their eyes widening. The papers detailed a long-forgotten philanthropic project initiated by both the Anderson and Thompson families in the 1960s, a joint effort to fund a community health clinic in their neighborhood. "Our families worked together once," James explained, "but the project fell apart due to racial tensions. I think it's time we revived it." Malik felt a surge of emotion. The idea of their families collaborating in the past, despite the societal pressures of the time, was powerful. Thompson, for his part, looked stunned. "A clinic?" Thompson murmured. "Our families together?" James nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and I have a proposal. What if we restart this project? We could raise funds to support Dr. Anderson's clinic, expanding its services to reach more underserved communities." The idea took root immediately. Over the next hour, the three men discussed possibilities, their excitement growing. They envisioned a clinic that would not only provide medical care, but also serve as a community center for health education and reconciliation efforts. As they left the coffee shop, plans already forming, Malik felt a sense of coming full circle. What had started as a contentious doctor-patient relationship had evolved into a friendship, and now into a shared mission that honored both their families' histories and their hopes for the future. In the weeks that followed, the project gained momentum. Aisha and her youth group eagerly joined the fundraising efforts. Community members, inspired by Malik and Thompson's story, contributed time and resources. The local media picked up on the story, spreading the message of reconciliation and community healing even further. On the day of the groundbreaking ceremony for the expanded clinic, Malik stood before a crowd of supporters, Thompson and James by his side. As he looked out at the diverse faces, people of all races and backgrounds coming together for a common cause, he felt overwhelmed with emotion. Today, Malik began, his voice strong and clear, "We're not just breaking ground on a building. We're breaking ground on a new future. A future where old wounds can heal, where understanding can triumph over prejudice, and where a community can come together to care for all its members." As the crowd cheered and the first shovel broke the earth, Malik knew that this was more than just a happy ending to their story. It was a new beginning, not just for him and Thompson, but for their entire community. The journey of healing and reconciliation was far from over, but with each step, they were creating a path for others to follow.